Hello and welcome to Analog Insights. In today's episode of Talking Cameras, I'm sitting down with Carl-Johan Dahlberg Fogelklou, who is the bassist of the famous Swedish rock band Mando Diao. To his fans, he is known as CJ, and of course he is a full-time musician, most importantly, and also involved in various side projects next to his main band Mando Diao, and he was even kind enough to create the original music for this episode. And yet, CJ at some point got bitten by the film photography bug, and since then has started photographing the band on tour and in various other situations, sharing many of the images in a dedicated Instagram account that you can find here. He originally reached out to me to get some advice on certain Leica vintage cameras and lenses, and we immediately got along well with each other. And at some point I cautiously asked whether he would be willing to sit down for an episode of Talking Cameras, and he really jumped at the opportunity. So in today's episode, we of course take a look at his really interesting camera collection, but also his personal approach to photography and his very personal journey to film photography and what really got him started. So let's dive in there and enjoy the conversation. All right, so welcome to the show, CJ. I really appreciate that you're taking the time. You're currently in between tours, right? And in your home studio in Sweden. And the audience just heard a brief introduction, but as always, I would kindly ask you to briefly introduce yourself in your own words.
Yes, I'm CJ, Carl-Johan Dahlberg Fogelklou, the bass player of Mando Diao. I'm a synth collector and a camera collector. I don't know what it is about collecting things, but it's just something, I mean, not everything, but some stuff I do love. And yeah, I recently became hooked by photography, and especially film photography. So that's why we're here today.
And how did that happen? Because before we dive into the cameras and discuss that, I would be really curious to see what was your journey?
Well, it started off, I was starting to work with two guys with commercial music. And they were like, you know, filming stuff, and they were doing things, and they were also really interested in film cameras, and I mean film cameras like 35mm film cameras. So it's a guy called Rickard Hörnqvist and Carl Dahlberg who introduced this thing to me, and I just remembered like vaguely. I mean, I think there is like a SLR cameras were laying somewhere with a bunch of lenses, and it was my grandfather's old camera, this one. And I found it, and it didn't work, so I had to hand it in. And I found this guy in a city called Lidköping, and his name is Andreas, and he fixed it for me. And I started photographing. When I got the results back, there was 2 images that was well exposed. The other ones were too dark because I was just guessing, you know. But the look of those pictures just took me back to when I was a kid, and how, you know, how it felt like seeing pictures like back in the days, and I got really nostalgic, and I thought that was like a 3-dimensional sort of look to everything, which made me like, yeah, super nostalgic and a bit emotional, to say the least. So I just started to, you know, photographing more and more and more, and got better at it, and then I started to photographing my friends and stuff like that. So that's how it all started.
And now looking at the cameras that you have in front of you, how about we start with the Olympus OM-1 on the side?
So my grandfather was a tunnel engineer, and pretty rare job back in the 50s and 60s. So he worked in several different countries, but he was building the subway line in Hong Kong. I think it's called the Victoria Line, I'm not sure. And I think he bought this camera in Hong Kong back in the early 70s, and you can tell that it's his because his initial it's his like birth year is right here on beneath. So it's 1911-10. So he was born in 1919.
Wow.
So and he bought like pretty decent amount of lenses too. I've got like a 135 millimeter lens. I've got the 300 millimeter lens, 50 and 35 as well. So he left a bunch of good stuff, you know. So that's how I started off, and I kind of, you know, the thing with the Olympus is, it is so good with details, and I like the contrast, I like the look of it, I like how simple it is, how easy it is to just take it up and take a photo. You can see it. The viewfinder is absolutely insane for such an old camera. You like see everything, and that's what I love about this camera. And also thanks to you, I got to know this camera a little better, because that's how I first came across your videos. Was I was like, why do my pictures get so underexposed? How do I learn to expose things? And then you're like, oh, there's a little level on the top here that says on and off, and that's the light meter. And I'm like, okay. That's how little I knew in the beginning. But I've been shooting pretty a lot with this camera, and I've been documenting Mando Diao with this camera, and I've been documenting. We did like a really nice show together with bands like the Sounds and the Hives and Mando together, and it's been with me for quite much over these 1.5 years that I've been photographing with this, you know, photographing with film cameras. So yeah, I really like this camera. It's a great one.
Beautiful, yeah. And I think there would be purists out there arguing, if you already have an Olympus OM-1, what else do you need? so
yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. Yeah. And you know, saying that, you know, I'm a collector, so yeah. It all started off, you know, because I was pretty happy with this camera, but then it all started, you know. I watched this film called The Eye, I think, like a late 70s film, and there was a film about this woman who was a photographer, and I was like, what kind of camera does she have? And then it started, you know. I started buying cameras, and I started looking out for other cameras and stuff like that. So. Yeah.
Yeah, which brings us to the next one. What else did you bring for today?
Yeah, I would say the next one is two, because I found this camera in the local photo shop in Halmstad where I live, and it's a Leicaflex SL with, and I got a really good deal out of it. It had like a 35 millimeter lens when I bought it, and a 90 millimeter lens, and it was in really good condition. So, you know, I started using it, and talking about contrast and detail in the Olympus One, what I got from this camera was stoked about. And you know, I live by the ocean, so you know, you go out and you like photograph rocks and stuff like that, which looks fine and nice, and the ocean, and you know, sunsets and things, and this camera just captured that so nice, and it has that sort of like a Summicron luxury look to everything that you do with it, and that led me to yeah, and also I thought this camera didn't work in the beginning, because I didn't understand, because the exposures were wrong as well all the time, and it was either too dark or too bright, and I was like, why the hell don't I get, like, you know, good exposures? When I got good exposures, it was fantastic, but then it was like it didn't measure light the same way as the Olympus or my digital cameras and stuff like that. So, and again, your videos, and you say like it's a spot meter, and I'm like, oh my god, of course. So now I know to measure correctly, and that led me to buying this, you know, never used Leicaflex SL2. So I say that this is one camera, because it's like a pair, and it's like a wedded couple sort of. And this camera is fantastic. I bought it from a guy in Canada, and it has never been used. It came in the box, you know, and I think the only thing they did to it before I got it was like put a battery in it to check the light meter. Yeah. So, and here I have the Generation 2. The Summicron f2 lens, Leica, which is also like really nice. I don't really know I can't really tell the difference in between version 1 and version 2 of the lenses. Maybe the version 1 is a little bit more contrasted than the version 2. I'm not really sure, but you know, being a collector, you gotta have 1 and 2.
Yeah.
You know?
And I really like that you went for the Leica SL, the Leicaflex versions, because of course you could use the Leica R lenses on other cameras as well, but especially these two models have something really cool about them. That 1970s vibe and the place that Leica had at the time, you can really feel that in terms of overall quality and so on.
Absolutely, and it also fills up my need and my love for SLR cameras, because I really like SLR cameras. I think it's beautiful how you can actually see what you're taking photos of, and which doesn't take away the magic about this camera that we're going to talk about soon. But I just seriously enjoy heavy SLR cameras made way back in time.
Yeah.
So. And this, I could go to the gym with these ones and like work out and stuff.
So true. Yeah. So how about we talk about the next Leica on the table? Yeah.
The next one is you should feel guilty about this one as well, because I didn't have this when I reached out to you in the first place. And I wouldn't say you convinced me, but I was inspired by your videos and stuff like that to get this camera. And it was one of those things that if you want to document stuff like in time, and it is very easy to have like a small camera also that you can just stick to your eye and just take a nice photo. And there is nothing else in the world that is more like beautiful and aesthetically perfect than the Leica M6. And did I buy the hype? Yes, I did. Is it a hype? Yes, it is, but it's also it's pure magic. Leica M cameras is just like there's nothing more. I mean, and it's also, I don't know if it's a German thing, but if something works, don't mess with it. And that's, I mean, all these other camera manufacturers, they try to improve their cameras, to try to make it better and better and better, and then faster and vice versa. Even if you buy like a Leica M11, there's still a rangefinder that's been here since the 50s. And I love that fact. And you still have Jogi Löw as your football coach as well, or? Yeah. So if it works, don't mess with it.
Yeah.
I love that.
And as you indicated, you can, if you know how to operate a Leica M3 from the 50s, you can basically pick up an M11 today, and you still have the basic same functionality. Of course, there are small details you need to get used to, but that's it, right?
Yeah. And the funny thing about this camera is also what I realized after using it for a little while. It is that it becomes a little bit. It's an instrument. In my world, and in my opinion, it becomes like a part of your body. It's something you just stick it to your eye, and you have both eyes open, because I look through my right eye when I use the camera, so you get both eyes open, and you see the picture, and then you take it, and I think it's just a wonderful feeling just to be able to do that, and it's just a nice way of taking photos, and yeah, it's a body part camera, sort of.
Yeah.
Like my limb, one of my limbs. and also being a Swede, I have to say, this thing with the size lenses, both money-wise, but also Hasselblad, the Swedish-German connection. I have a Carl Zeiss. This is a Biogon F2 35mm CM lens. And I have a 50mm as well, and I really like these lenses. I think they take really good pictures. Of course, someday I will take the plunge and get a Summicron, but I'm really happy with these ones at the moment, actually.
Yeah, so fantastic. Yeah, and being a Swede, as you already mentioned, there has to be a Hasselblad on this table, right?
Yeah, there has to be. It's a 503 CXI. Really nice camera. I've done a lot of nature photography with it, and a lot of like slide film, big, you know, big not negatives but positive like images, and I mean the details, the way you use it, the way it slows you down, the way you're like looking like this, looking like that, looking like you know, and also like, you know, when being a Swede, also like every class photo you took, there was this guy coming up with 2 umbrellas behind him and the Hasselblad camera. That's just the way it worked in Sweden.
Nice.
Nobody used it and anything else. Maybe there was some Mamiya users back, you know, but this thing is just like, and on the other, and also they went to the moon with this, not exactly this camera, but still something similar. The lenses, the whole house, and actually Hasselblad is not too far from where I live either. I live in Halmstad. It's pretty close to Gothenburg, so it feels a little home having this guy over here. It didn't travel too far.
Nice.
So now I really love my Hasselblad. It's a beautiful camera, and I got this 80mm lens, and I have a 120 as well.
Ooh,
both really
nice.
great lenses.
Mm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's cool.
And I like listening to you to hear that you're using the cameras for different purposes. So this being more of a landscape and nature camera versus other cameras that you used to use to capture the band on tour and things like that. Really cool.
Yeah, I mean, being in a rock band is like everybody has, you know how it is with artists. They don't have the patience to let me focus. It's much easier to have like a thing with an autofocus, but you know this one is way too slow for them. So you know, I've had this with me a lot as well. But you know, there's like 1 or 2 good pictures of band members, and otherwise I take this up to my summer house, and there's like super nice nature up there, and you just, you know, capture like when the fall comes and all the colors and stuff like that. And now when the spring is here, it's gonna be fantastic to just put probably some Ektachrome or something like that inside, and just like shoot like really nice slide pictures. I like that a lot.
So there's one more on the table.
Yeah, there's one more.
A big one.
Talking about rangefinders, the Texas Leica, and the Fuji GW690 version 2, and this one is this one is pretty much it's a kind of a joke. At the same time, it's a fantastic tool, and it just looks so funny because, you know, even though my head is not the smallest, I can cover it. And but it's a beautiful camera, and I've been using it for very strange things, because I was looking at this video on YouTube about taking IR photos, and especially what is it called, the Kodak version, the Aerochrome, and of course you couldn't find the Aerochrome anywhere, so I quickly turned to is it Rolly that makes Rolly makes IR film. So I got some black and white IR film, and I was like, you know, going over internet and looking for stuff, and I found this guy who took pictures of people with IR film, and it looks so creepy. And I was like, God damn it, I gotta do that. And he was taking pictures with like a regular like SLR camera, some Minolta camera or something like that. And it's like, yeah, you have to, you know, get your exposure to correct, and you have to add some stops and vice versa, and then you have to focus, and then you have to put on the IR filter. And I'm like, that sounds inconvenient. I want the flow to be a bit faster. And I just realized that I have my Fuji GW690 690, and but then I don't look through the lens, so I could get like an IR filter for this camera, just find out what size it is, get an IR filter, and take photos with this beast. And I started doing that, and it turned out really, really good. So we've been taking some like really scary pictures of ourselves with this camera, and the result is just insane. It's it's super cool. But now it's some E100 film in here, because I got tired of always having IR film in this camera. And I will wait for the summer as well to come. I have to capture some like green trees in IR as well, to get those white, you know, glowy things. So, but this camera is fantastic because the negatives are so huge, like it's 6x9. So the detail you get is like almost like a digital camera. It's like insane. If that's good or not, I don't know, but it's just like, it's insane. I love this camera. It's a beautiful one, and it's fun. You can also have it on a like a party when you dress up like to other things. Now, and I could be the crazy photographer, bringing my 690, going around with it like a joke.
All right, yeah, super interesting. After all these cameras, of course, I'm super curious to get to know you as a collector. So since when would you consider yourself a collector? And also knowing that you already mentioned that you're also collecting synthesizers, I'm interested in the bigger picture. So in which context should we consider this collection?
I think it started off, and as I mentioned earlier, I saw this film called The Eye. It's the same director that did The Escape from New York. It was called, I can't remember his name now, but anyway, I saw this film and I thought it was really interesting, and then I started to look up cameras, and then I started to collecting, and I started to notice which cameras would fit me or not. So I've gone through shitloads of cameras, to say the least, and I ended up selling a lot of them, buying new stuff, buying more expensive gear, buying more interesting gear, buying whatever, and I ended up with a collection, which this is the 5 most used cameras, I think, for me, and my favorites. But and then when you put the question, when I thought about it, I thought that I'm not a camera collector. I don't have that many cameras anymore. And then I made I put everything on a table, and I was like, actually, I do have a lot of cameras. So it was kind of wow. But it's I like the thing of collecting things with good quality, and every camera has its own like little soul to it. There's one camera that I haven't talked about here that I like a lot, and I think it's my great-grandmother's camera, an old Zeiss camera that I've been shooting a lot with, and it's like, it has a dreamy, foggy look to everything you take with it. It's super fascinating to take pictures with, and just realizing that it's been in the family for generations and stuff like that. So, and these kind of things really inspires me.
Yeah. And again, sticking to the gear, is there anything on your bucket list, any kind of camera that you would say, okay, this is something that you really aspire to? Especially looking at your collection, it feels like, wow, you already got amazing gear, so what else could you need?
Yeah, I'm super inspired to find myself a like a Barnack, like a 3F or something like that, because I have been shooting those, I've been borrowing those cameras, but they haven't been in really good condition, or not good enough, and I would like to get a really nice version of like a 50s, like with the 2 like viewfinders, and to slow myself down with the rangefinder as well, and just the feeling of using gear that is so old, and so like there's a historical sort of vibe to them, and so I'm gonna try, and I don't think that's gonna be super difficult, and it's not gonna cost me a fortune, but it's just gonna be an effort to find the one that really works well, and that who is maintained in a good condition, and that's something I really look forward to try to get. And then I have the lens for the Hasselblad, the 50mm lens f4. I'm really looking forward to try to get hold of one of those as well.
Yeah,
and then you always have like the Mamiya 7 and stuff like that, but it just feels like, I don't know, I got things that I need at the moment, so it's not that important. The Leica M6 was definitely on my bucket list before, and now I got it, so I'm happy.
And how do you balance that with your other collections that you have? You mentioned that to me on the phone, like, okay, you have these synthesizers that you're collecting. I think you also have vintage basses, of course, as a bass player.
Oh yeah, sure.
At some point you have to, right. Wonderful, right? At some point you have to decide where to put your money, right? Do you make that dependent on opportunities that come up, where you think like, oh, now is a good time to get this one? Or is it rather, oh, you have a period where you are focusing on film cameras, and then you have a period where you're more into bases? Yeah.
I have been taking a break in collecting musical gear, and when I do buy musical gear these days, it's more like, you know, I trade stuff in, and I get new gear. So, you know, I don't massively collect. I do massively collect, but still, you know, I get rid of the things that I don't use, and that goes for cameras as well. So if I don't just have cameras sitting on the shelf, I think they should be used, and because if you don't use them, they will like get destroyed, and I think that would be sad. So if I wouldn't use my M6 for a long time, I would probably sell it, because I don't think it deserves to end up on a shelf in a Swedish home where nobody loves it. So I'd rather have someone else, you know, taking photos with it if that would happen. And so that's one of the things, and that is a little explanation to how like I afforded these things, because I took a break collecting instruments, and I sold a lot of instruments and stuff like that. So I had some money to put into camera gear, and then I had this, like, I had a very big collection of cameras before, and I sold a lot of them to, you know, get the things that I really wanted. So the Hasselblad, for instance, was one of those things. It costed me a lot of cameras to get this one. I had to trade in a lot of cameras to get this one, and put in some money as well. But I didn't buy it like up front, like cash. So I had like a big collection of gear that they got from me to get this.
And I mean, this is common, right, for collectors, that at some point you do what's often referred to as upward consolidation, that you get rid of 4 or 5 cameras and then get really your holy grail or whatever it is. Yeah, makes sense. And as I briefly touched on earlier, what I really like is that you're obviously using the cameras for different purposes, and also appreciate them for either slowing you down or for speeding things up and so on. And I would be curious, as a musician doing a lot of photography on tour or photographing the band and so on, how would you describe your approach to photography in these contexts?
Well, I always have the camera with me. Some camera is always on me, so sort of. And I like to capture, you know, and tell the story what it is to be a musician, and tell the story of, you know, this dressing room is not more, you know, luxurious than your I don't know, your kitchen, or it is kind of boring to be in an airport all the time, and festival catering isn't that good and stuff like that. So, and you know, to capture emotions like my friends, I can just take a picture of like our drummer, like having a, you know, a hard time, like coping with the situation, for instance, like sitting there and just have nothing to do, and that's an emotion that you can actually capture, and then when you capture it on film, you capture it physically. You capture a little gap in time, like a millisecond of time, and you get it on this little negative, and that's one of those things that is so inspiring to me. I think these things are as close as you can get to a time machine, because you can actually physically capture time with a camera, with a film camera. On a digital camera, it's a different story. You can capture something there as well, but this one, you cannot get rid of a negative if you don't burn it up or destroy it. But it's just you're capturing time with material, like silver emulsion or whatever it is. You just tick and you capture it, and that is going back to documenting my journey with the band. That is something that I think is so fascinating, to capture these emotions and to capture them for real. And that is also what is so inspiring about film photography, that it is real. It feels three-dimensional also. It feels glowy. It feels, you know, it's something I recognize, you know. So, and also I can take like blurry pictures, and it doesn't matter, because maybe that situation was blurry. Maybe I take a picture of Björn and he's not in focus. Maybe he wasn't in focus emotionally at that time, or you know, whatever and stuff like that. So, speaking about others like street photographers, like William Klein and things like that, I get really inspired by those guys, and you know, everybody wants to do the same thing that he did. Maybe, I don't know, but I try to do my interpretation of what he did is to capture my life and the things around me, being the sideman with the thing in his face, like click. And sometimes they're like, can you just take that fucking camera away?
I wanted to ask about that. Are people sometimes annoyed if you're always around?
Yeah,
or,
and my wife too, when we're out on walks, you know, and it's like, and you find something you want to capture, and like, oh, come on, can we just, you know, go on? She loves to take photos as well, but sometimes she's like, can we just walk this today? I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I know.
Can I bring my camera anyway?
Nice. And one more question or a thing or aspect I would be interested in is that connection to music, and we briefly touched on that before in one of our conversations. I mean, film photography is a very analog process, right? Or
yeah.
Today, often also a hybrid process. And I would be curious to hear whether you also see a relationship to that when it comes to music, to using some primarily analog gear and then maybe using it in a hybrid process or even in a completely analog process.
Well, actually recording music is exactly the same for me as it is with cameras. Because if you see like this guy over here, this is a 1976 Yamaha CS60. It's the little brother of the synthesizer that Vangelis used when he was recording music to Blade Runner and films like that. So here you have like an analog synthesizer that creates this massive sound that you record onto a computer. And that's sort of the same thing. You have this analog camera and you record onto a film, and then you develop it, and then you scan it. And I think the computer in music industry works as a scanner almost, like it scans what you're doing. So that's very interesting, and I've been using plugins when I've been recording music, but I'm mainly like hardware and analog stuff, because I like to get my hands on what I'm doing. I don't want to program feelings, because sometimes you can program like you open up a filter in a synthesizer like wow, but I want to do it physically. I want to capture that with my hand. So yeah, and it is important to me to do like that, to be honest. So that's very similar. Yeah.
So thank you very much for your time this morning. I really appreciate and also your perspective, that is to me very special, and the connections that you can build as a musician to film photography. I really enjoyed discussing your collection, and yeah.
Thanks, man.
Curious to see how it develops and in which direction it will build. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Max, and have a nice one. See you in Munich.
Yeah, definitely.
Take it easy, brother.
Bye.